Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here today. My name is Tim McFadden, and I am the co-chair of the program committee with Cindy Teasdale McGowan of Missouri Venture Forum. I'm also a partner at the law firm of Posanelli, and I'm the chairman of its startup venture group here in St. Louis. It's my honor today to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Dr. Tom Cohen. Dr. Cohen is an entrepreneur and scientist focused on the molecular diagnostic industry. Dr. Cohen is the co-founder and CEO of Nanopore Diagnostics, which is developing a 30-minute test for diagnosing bacterial infections through nanopore sensor technology. Wow. Dr. Cohen has been involved in not-for-profit organizations promoting entrepreneurship throughout his career, including serving as CEO of the University of California, San Diego Entrepreneur Challenge, being the co-founder of the Balsa Foundation, an organization that offers grants and resources to first-time entrepreneurs, and in 2014, being named a fellow in the nationally recognized Pipeline Entrepreneur Development Program. Dr. Cohen received his undergraduate degree in molecular and cellular biology from Vanderbilt University and received his PhD in biomedical sciences from the University of California, San Diego. And with that, I give you Dr. Cohen. Thank you.
Thank you for the intro, and thank you to MVF for the opportunity to tell my story today. So in kind of putting together what I was going to talk about, it became clear to me that the theme of my background into entrepreneurship and our company's genesis is how important a vibrant and supportive ecosystem is to a first-time entrepreneur like myself. So I'm going to tell my story while really highlighting all the different groups in St. Louis that have been crucial to getting us to the point where we're at today. So my entrepreneurship story starts during grad school in San Diego. It was there that I realized entrepreneurship is what I wanted to do. So I went to San Diego for grad school thinking that my career path was in academic science. My dream was to be an academic research professor. And I left, completely transitioning to, entrepreneurship is what I was meant to do. I think there's two key things that happened there, and I think they're relevant to kind of what I just talked about in comparing what the San Diego ecosystem was then to what St. Louis is becoming today. And the first is that I kind of stumbled into a couple networking events while I was in San Diego of startups and entrepreneurs, and became immediately kind of addicted and enthralled by the contagious enthusiasm and energy that's present at those events. And that kind of got me involved in the local ecosystem, just wanting to be part of that. It's not necessarily one entrepreneur, but when you get like 6 entrepreneurs together, there's just like this contagious energy that's in the room. And I think that's very relevant today. I see Travis sitting right here. I think that's what people talk about with Venture Cafe. And for those of you that don't know, Venture Cafe is a local gathering of anyone in St. Louis that's interested or part of the startup ecosystem. And it's a very diverse crowd. And I'm there and often meet people that aren't directly related to startups. And they say they're there because of that exact same thing that drew me to startups, just the energy and wanting to talk to people that are part of it. And there's something addicting about being close to it. And so that initially is what brought me close to entrepreneurship. And so when I was in San Diego, as Tim said, I was part of a business plan competition, and that was my way of kind of being part of the ecosystem. But there was this kind of wall that I perceived in between me and founders. I didn't have a business background. It just didn't seem like something that could be done. And I think a crucial part of my development was a very good friend of mine who was my year at my graduate program, started a company during grad school and had a lot of success pretty quickly. And that really tore down that wall to me. It all of a sudden made it approachable. Like, wait, I could do that. If he could do it, I can do it. And so I think that was a really crucial part of my development. And I think it's interesting to think about St. Louis in general as the ecosystem grows and more people start companies and more people know people that start companies. You might have other people that had that perceived wall that I perceived break down, and more people interested and willing to participate in the ecosystem. So after grad school, I moved back to St. Louis. I'm from here originally, so it was a move back home. The move was personal. I was getting married and wanted to start a family near my family. So I came back here and took a research position at WashU with the idea of trying to kind of sit on the entrepreneurial dream and wait for the perfect opportunity. And so I was there applying the kind of scientific knowledge I had learned, just kind of networking into the system and waiting for that right opportunity. I'll mention one group that while I was at WashU I participated with, and that's the Balsa group. that I'm sure many people here might be familiar with, but I think it's a really awesome organization that's worth mentioning, particularly for those that are along my career path, the academic career path. So throughout grad school, and in addition to my time at WSU, I was trained to do one thing, and that is science in the lab with my hands in gloves on the way toward a teaching job. You get no training outside of that. And so what the Balsa Group allows for is students and postdocs along that same path that I was along to get experience outside the lab. There's people that are desperate enough for that experience, like I was, to work for free. And so it's a consulting project where you engage local, large, and small companies that are interested in the kind of self-selected group of students at WSU who are talented and hardworking and are also willing to work for free. And so Balsa charges a very small fee, but that's solely for engagement. The consultants don't get access to that. And that was a way for me to network into the community. I did 4 projects while I was at WSU. And I bring that up not because I think it's a great organization worth mentioning. It helped develop entrepreneurs like myself, but that's actually also where I met my co-founder. So the genesis of our company, and this will come up a couple times today, is really a Balsa story. So I did a project with Sigma Aldrich and met someone that was in business development there, Christoph Bausch, who was actually my co-founder. So after the project, Christoph had approached me. He had taken an option to a technology from the University of Missouri, that's our technology platform, and had interest in trying to start a company. 2 months into it, he had left Sigma and was an entrepreneur for 2 months, didn't get much traction, and for family reasons decided he needed to take another corporate job. So he had kind of the bones built, at least he had the option. He hadn't really formed the company yet, and he was looking for someone that had the time and the energy to kind of run with it, and that was perfect for me. I fell in love with the technology immediately, and I had what I thought was a great partnership, someone from the business side of life sciences and then myself together kind of trying to make this thing happen. And so that's the background of Nanopore Diagnostics. So this isn't on. It doesn't really matter. There we go. OK. So I'm going to kind of talk about the path real quick. So that's where we started. 2012, the option was put down. In 2013 is when I was on board. We formed the company, and we set out to do the first activity, which is trying to raise some money. So I'm still at WSU at this time, and we took a very broad brush to this. We applied to every competition locally. We approached every single funding source that could possibly be relevant. And I went back and looked in preparation for this talk. There was 22 different opportunities we pursued, and we got no's across the board. It was a huge strikeout. I'm a very competitive person. The more we got no, the more determined I became that we're going to make this work. Like, we're going to find a way. After that many losses, though, about 9 months of no's, we decided it was time to kind of take a step backwards maybe and go undercover for maybe 3 to 6 months and see if we could figure out and learn from what we were hearing for why the no's were occurring and come back with a new business plan that maybe was more fundable. And as we were successful with that plan, I think this is the one area where I feel comfortable giving advice on our path. And so I put together a couple bullet points on what that process was for us. This is what we learned and iterated upon to create something that was fundable. And the first is the most important. We were selling the technology. So what we had licensed from the University of Missouri was a rapid and portable method for counting pieces of DNA. It was basically a change sorter for nucleic acids. There was nothing out there that could do what our technology could do so quick and in a handheld device. And that's why we were excited. And we were selling that platform. The application then was secondary. And the application we were choosing was as a lung cancer diagnostic, solely because that's how it had been studied in the academic lab where we took it from. That's where the data was. And so we kind of took a step back and realized that, first of all, the application had to become first. You pitch the application, and then you say, oh, we can do this because we have this technology. And secondly, there's a bit of a non sequitur. Our amazingly rapid and portable technology doesn't really have a utility in cancer diagnostics. No one needs a really quick portable result when diagnosing cancer. And so we kind of took a step back and realized we're pitching the wrong application and we're not selling it hard. And so that's a transition we made. We spent some time doing some serious market validation, and we studied on an application that we're now pursuing, which is bacterial diagnostics, something that could allow a physician to very quickly know which antibiotics are necessary for a patient, if any antibiotics are necessary. In addition to finding the right application, it's also an application where I have a personal story, and I think that makes it a much stronger sell. So not only are we finally putting the application first, we have the right application, but I can stand up there and say the clinical need exists, and I'm an example of it. And that made it such a stronger pitch. I think that the second issue that we came up with is first-time founders, particularly how long our path was in the clinical space. People were wary of giving money to first-time founders. And the kind of fix we found for that was putting a board together of people that had made strategic decisions before successfully. We found a bunch of successful entrepreneurs that were willing to sit and help us advise us when we had to make difficult decisions. So people were giving us the money knowing that we're going to work hard, and any difficult decision we have to make, we have these people that are going to share in that process with us. That was most certainly crucial. And then I think the third point I have here comes from that experience of being beat up while giving pitches. I think I went into the process initially thinking that I need to be the expert. Any weakness I show is going to turn them off. And that was incorrect. It's important to, when pitching and trying to sell probably anything, I've really only sold this business, but to know when to be humble and know when to be confident, and in particular know when to say, I don't know, let me research that and get back to you. I have a quick story I'll tell in that process. During our first attempt at the Owen Cup, which is WashU's business plan competition, Cliff Holcamp, who's a professor at WashU, nationally recognized entrepreneurship professor, kind of asked me a question about if WashU put in money, how much would they get out based on our exit that we're projecting? And I just straight up didn't know how to answer it. And so I sat there and stumbled for 5 minutes trying to come up with something, and he completely called me out on it being complete bullcrap. And a very humbling moment, and I learned from that in the future. Whenever you're not comfortable with something, you say, I actually don't have the answer to that offhand. Do you mind if I email you in a day or something like that? And I found that to be a very effective response, because not only then do you give them the right answer, but you've opened up a dialogue with someone after the meeting. And so that's just confidence you get to. You almost have to be confident to say you don't know. You're coming from a position of weakness when you're trying to push something that you don't have the answer for. Obviously, in the clinical space, one of the other things that was very not attractive in our pitch is we were saying, we need like $30 million in 5 years to get to an exit. And that, compared to other people in these competitions we're competing in, they're like, yeah, we need to build an app in 6 months and hit the market. That's a really hard pitch. So we needed to come up with a way we could build into our business plan where we could have quick commercial validation. And the way we did that is by finding a strategic partner in a non-clinical opportunity, a research service opportunity that was willing to take our technology. We sub-licensed it to them, so we weren't the ones that were going to commercialize it, but they were going to take it and bring it to market quickly. And therefore, that is commercial validation that de-risks the technology substantially to future investors. And I think that was a big piece in making us an investable opportunity. And the last bullet point I have up there is that, getting that first money in was impossible. But as soon as we got it, it snowballed really quickly. We got really lucky for our first money in. Our first money in was BioGenerator. We had pitched to them, pushed off before I was involved, and then myself probably 6 times. And knows all those 6 times. But they knew who we were. They were actually very helpful in trying to get us to the point where we were investable, making connections. They actually were paying for some service providers to help us with things. They just weren't putting money into the company yet. And they had a grant through the Economic Development Association to invest in early stage startups. And that grant was going to run up, and they had an extra $48,000 in it. And we happened to be the one company they knew that was pitching constantly and persistent. And so our first money in was, if this doesn't run out, we're not going to get to use it. Let's give it to Nanopore Diagnostics. And so that was our first investment. And then we were able to leverage that. BioGenerator, the major early stage biotech investor in St. Louis has invested in us. And then that snowballed along with reinventing ourselves into some success. So we then went back to the drawing table and we approached all those funding sources again. And in particular, the competitions, we had success. There was 4 competitions we applied to the first time around that we lost to. The second time around, we won all 4. And so that success really snowballed. And I think it's those 4 points. It's learning what people want to hear, and not necessarily restructuring the business, but restructuring the pitch of the business. That was crucial for us. So we raised that money, and now I'll kind of go over what's happened since then. So the initial chunk of money was used to build our bacterial assay. So as I said, our inventor had only used the technology in cancer detection. And so we pulled it out. We had to start from kind of square one, building the bacterial assay and demonstrating it worked. And that's what we did with this initial chunk of money. We built the bacterial assay, we patented it, and we had some demonstration of it in kind of some contrived samples. And that led us to the next round of funding. And I think it's an interesting point to make that when we set out now, we thought, man, we've raised money and we've demonstrated we can create value with that money. We hit the road again, and we again really struggled to raise money. And I think, and I'm not going to spend as much time on this genesis, but once again, we realized that we had moved up in sophistication to the type of investors we were talking to, and we were still using the pitch that we used for competitions. And knowing who you're pitching to is just so crucial. And it's hard to know that without failing a little bit, at least from my perspective. And maybe that's why it's hard to raise money as a first-time entrepreneur. But we iterated once again. We came up with the pitch people wanted. And the big difference, I guess, between the competition pitch and the seed round pitch for us was moving away from the altruism and clinical need of our technology to how are you going to take my money and make money. That's what the seed investors wanted to hear. So we raised that round of seed funding. We closed it early last year. And since then, we've had some wins in the patent front. We now have 2 issued US patents. And we've completed our first clinical validation study. We've actually taken clinical samples, run it through our prototype platform, and we have data that show that it works. So we're at a point now where that we've kind of run what we can do. So our technology exists in a lab prototype, something that's pretty far from being a product you can put a box on and sell. We've kind of run the cycle on that prototype. We need to build a product. And so we're now at a point where we're trying to leverage this data we have into the kind of growth we need to build that product. And so I'll kind of end the talk about where we are there. I just wanted to go quickly and highlight all the organizations. So there's clearly ones I'm going to leave out here, but these are the ones that I feel were crucial to our success. The ones that we interacted with were incredibly generous to us, and there's a number of these people in the room today that I think without them, we wouldn't have made that transition I just talked about. So obviously the Balsa group, as I mentioned, that's how I met my co-founder. They actually participated in the market validation work I talked about, where we found bacterial diagnostics as our ideal application. In particular, we met Harry Rader through that group, who's been incredibly helpful to us, giving us his time, helping us with the pitch, and making connections. Square One is a program that used to be called the Buyer Entrepreneur Development Program when I ran through it, and that was my first intro to entrepreneurship. They helped us build our first business plan. It's run for the Center for Emerging Technologies, and John McAllister through that program has still been very generous of his time for us. WashU obviously has been incredibly influential. I mean, they put some money into the company, and people through the Scandalaris Center there, Ken Harrington and now Imre, have been incredible advocates for us, making connections and kind of just being willing to have that confidential conversation with me about my journey and troubles I've been having. And so they've been an incredible resource for us. Biogenerator, obviously, the first money in, but I think the important part that Biogenerator has made for us, and I think this is a really key thing that I'm not sure people outside of our space really know, is that Biogenerator, their model is we'll invest in you, and then we'll offer you free space to do your work. Not only do you not have to pay rent, but we're going to stock that space out with all the common equipment you need. It makes sense for them. They don't want to invest in 10 companies that then spend that money on the same pieces of equipment in separate space. But it's a really rare opportunity. I know people that are doing what I'm trying to do in San Diego, Boston, and Chicago, and none of them have access to something like this. And therefore, their burn rates are so high. And so, we're doing a lot of trying to attract strategic interest right now. And strategic partners look at our business and the accomplishments we've had and the burn rate we've had, and they're amazed. That doesn't exist anywhere else. And it's solely because of the resource Biogenerator provides. And I think that's a really cool thing that St. Louis has. Arch Grants has been awesome for us. And not just, obviously the money's really nice. But what Arch Grants does, which is really cool, is the unsolicited connections to people that can help you. So Ben Burke, who's the director of entrepreneurship there, very regularly sends an email. I'm 2 years away from my time as an Arch Grant recipient and still get emails from him. He meets someone that he thinks could help us. It's an email introduction. So but last night when I was putting this together, I went back and looked, and I searched in my Gmail for Ben Burke, subject line, Arch Grants introduction. There were 28 emails. He's connected me to 28 people that I went and had coffee. Christine, one of them. That's how we originally met. And so that's just an incredible resource that, as they grow, continues to offer that kind of value to their past recipients. The Economic Development Partnership has also been really helpful to us. We received a grant from them. Christine's been very, very generous over time. We also met a number of judges through their competitions. Soren, of course, who actually came in one day and brought a bunch of his electrical engineering equipment and helped us rebuild our prototype. brought me to an electronics store. We bought some new equipment. I mean, it's amazing. And then we met Russ through the partnership as well, Russ Odegaard at Dynalabs, who's helping us kind of vet a non-clinical application of our platform. And those are judges of that competition we met who are willing to give to us. None of these people I'm talking about have we paid any money to. These are people that are just want to see us succeed, want to see St. Louis succeed. Missouri Technology Corporation is the largest investor in our company, an incredibly valuable organization. The way they work is it's state taxpayer money they're investing. It's an equity investment. It's not a grant, but it's a matching investment in that once you've earned the right to the money, you then raise money elsewhere, and they match the money you've raised elsewhere. And that, it's an incredible resource that not only has it lessened the amount of money we've been able to raise elsewhere, but when we go into a room and we say, once we get your 50K, we can match it with another 50K, it makes it a significantly more powerful pitch. And then I'm going to end quickly talking about Pipeline. This isn't a St. Louis exclusive organization, but I think it's a really interesting concept for St. Louis to consider these days. So Pipeline is an entrepreneur development program that came out of the Cohen Foundation in Kansas City. And it's open to Missouri, Kansas, and Nebraska. And I won't talk, the part that's relevant, not as relevant now, is that the entrepreneur development program itself had great value to me. I think in completing that, that's when I first started thinking of myself as an entrepreneur, not a scientist. But the part that's been even more valuable is that, St. Louis has been amazing for us, and we've made all these connections for people willing to give time to us. But there's a lot of communities like that throughout the Midwest, and what Pipeline tries to do is connect all of them to create this super community that could then rival something like California or Boston. If you connect all the individual cities through the Midwest, you have access to a lot of different resources. And so through Pipeline, we've got access to service providers and money in those other regions just by gaining access into their ecosystems. So I think, yeah, and now I'm gonna end quickly by transitioning to, there's a nonprofit that I'm part of called the Balsa Foundation that is looking to be on the other side of everything I've talked about today and try to serve the same role that I'm mentioning the ecosystem and these groups having such an important part in ours. So the Balsa Foundation is other first-time entrepreneurs like myself who are trying to initially try to ensure that other first-time entrepreneurs were able to get to success quicker. It took us 3 times through Arch Grants to win an Arch Grant. And so, I was sitting next to, so in 2014, I was still at WashU, and the guy that sat next to me in my lab was Maxime Shilovics, who at that time was running the Balsa Group. As I mentioned, the Balsa Group, the consulting group, charged a small engagement fee to their companies. And so they didn't pay anyone with that money, though. They've been doing it for 3 years. Their bank account was surprisingly large, and they didn't know what to do with the money. And so, Maxime and me and some others had the idea that, well, we should find a way to give that back to the community, because then the pitch for the Balsa Group becomes amazing. Give us money, we'll give you a ton of value, and then we'll take that money and not keep any of it and put it right back into the community. And so that's why we formed the Balsa Foundation. Initially, the idea of the Balsa Foundation was to focus on entrepreneurs at WashU, that we could try to get them to success quicker. And as I'll talk about in a second, it's transitioned completely. But the main programs of the Balsa Foundation are these 3. I'll very quickly talk about them. One is a roadmap that's basically just a downloadable PDF that has links and actions on how to start a company. Where to go to form your LLC, the different places you can raise money in St. Louis, what the applications look like, how to perform market validation. A very active document. And we tried to write it with the least amount of vernacular possible, so it's widely accessible. We also then have something we call the idea support, and I think this is really the crux of the organization, the coolest thing we do. And the idea here is that anyone in St. Louis can send us a 1 to 2 page document that highlights their business idea. We then have a group of 200+ experts, entrepreneurs, scientists, members of the St. Louis ecosystem that are willing to spend 5-10 minutes reading through your idea and provide feedback. And this really allows people that maybe aren't ready yet to go to a venture cafe and pitch their idea to, in kind of a faceless manner, get some feedback and cross that first line of sharing something that they're scared to share and get some feedback on it. And so this has been launched for a 1.5 years, and we've had 200+ people apply and receive feedback on their idea through the program. And then lastly, we do have a grant program. It's a really small grant. It's usually $1,000 to $2,000. We've gone through 3 cycles, and we've given away about $50K in cash and awards. And so I'll end what I think is the reason I brought this up in particular to talk about. So when we started the Balsa Foundation, we did not want to repeat what's out there. The crucial thing to us was finding a niche that made us different, so we weren't just another. I mean, Square One is something I went through that's very similar to what I pitched to you so far. So how can we be different? And the way we thought we were going to be different is by giving away a small amount of money, being access to any entrepreneur, lifestyle businesses. This does not need to be a high-growth business. And then by advertising through groups that aren't normally advertised through currently. The St. Louis County Library, United Way, in any kind of way we could think of to access people that we don't see normally at Venture Cafe. And we did that, and that kind of created the group, and because of the kind of money we're offering, the kind of businesses we're targeting, and the way we're marketing, we've kind of organically created an incredibly diverse population that serves our past finalists. And so we've done this 3 times. This is the 3rd group. On the right, you can see that those that applied were 80% from underrepresented backgrounds and 80% female. And then those that won are pretty much all that population. The only 2 white guys in this picture are the 2 that are running the organization right now. And so we've kind of very organically created this group that focuses on a diverse population of soon-to-be entrepreneurs. And so that's kind of, it happened accidentally, but it's great, and that's now our focus. So we've kind of changed and said the stated focus of our group is to help first-time entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds within the community kind of gain access to the community and get some money to get their ideas off the ground. So that's the end of what I had prepared. I'd be happy to take any questions.
All right. Let me grab this real quick. All right, raise your hand. I'll bring the microphone over because we are videotaping, so do not ask questions without.
So, MVF, Missouri Venture Forum. As a group, do you have any thoughts about how we can make sure that we are relevant and provide value to you and your company and others who are like you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the opportunity. So this isn't my first Missouri Venture Forum. I've been here once as a guest of BDO, and once before we had a booth. And I think that's the way you provide value to a first-time entrepreneur. You give them the opportunity to tell their story. And hopefully that leads to some sort of valuable connection. But I think perhaps most importantly, it's just the experience and the confidence that comes with putting a jacket on and coming here and talking to people you haven't met before. So from my perspective, there's a lot of value there, and I personally reap that value from MVF. Yep.
So put our logo on your slide. Thank you.
Given that you're a life sciences company, can you talk about your next steps in terms of you could either try to raise additional financing like a Series A or Series B, or you could instead try to do some kind of joint venture or licensing arrangement? And picking the choice you are.
Yeah, sure. So we're at a, I think, is an interesting point where we have the data that I think allows us to start building the device. But we need a lot of money. We need probably in total $15 to $20 million to build the device. It's the opposite of what most people think. The FDA process for us is only about a $1 million process. So really, the money we need to raise right now is solely built on device development. And so yeah, we could try to approach that by trying to raise some money, and we've done a little bit of legwork there, and it's going to be difficult, and we're going to get beat up. But we could get it done. The other option, though, that you mentioned, which is a lot more attractive to us if we can make it work, is approaching that through a strategic partnership. And that's particularly interesting for our opportunity because there's 3 companies right now that have fully developed nanopore platforms. And without going into too much detail, they're doing different things with those nanopore platforms, but the underlying bones are exactly what we need. So if we partner with a company like that, we could take our protected and validated IP portfolio, import it into their device, and allow that device to reach new applications, while also allowing us to avoid that 3-year, $20 million device development process. And so that is obviously our number 1 priority. And the company's really been built around trying to get the data to do that, while in the background knowing that we could build it if we need to. And I think an interesting point is the pitch then to those groups is once again a whole new transition away from what we did from seed investors, which is so different from what we pitched to the pre-seed investors. But that is our main focus right now, is trying to engage those partners. Yep.
Hi. You're at a moment when you need to grow and you're going to hire people. So where are you going to look for people? What kind of expertise do you need? Where do you think you can find them? And how can we help you as a community to achieve that goal?
Yeah, so there's really 2 types of people that that we will need to hire. There's those with Nanopore experience and those that have more general experience. And I make that distinction because those with Nanopore experience are really hard to find. There's 15 labs in the world that are studying it. And as I said, there's 3 companies. We're not going to be able to recruit someone from one of these large companies, so we really got to get people coming out of those labs. And so we've kind of had an active recruiting process through that always. Any Nanopore scientist that wants to come in the company, we're ready for them. And so the way we've been doing that is by anytime someone publishes something with the word Nanopore in it, I send an email to the investigator saying, hey, we're looking for, and that's how we've hired people to date, is through connections to academic inventors. But obviously we also are going to start to need some engineers and some people with different skill sets other than those actively practicing the technology in the lab.
So, Darcella Craven.
So yes.
Tom, I remember when you guys were first pitching, so
yes.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I want to go back to your Balsa piece.
Okay.
We've actually, at the Veterans Business Resource Center, we've actually had several clients win.
Okay, great.
Things,
yeah.
Which is great. The win is awesome and it gets them moving. My question for you is, it's great that the diversity is there with women and minorities and veterans, I love it. But then I went to a capital innovation piece and the entire stage was male and, well, Caucasian and like 2 or 3 women. So my question is, how do we get them from the immediate first smaller win to getting up to that bigger space? So what's after? What's the piece that Balsa can do after to help move those people up to that next level?
Gotcha, yeah. So, I think we have something in place for that. I think a lot of the people that are coming through aren't high growth ventures, but we do have some. The majority of them, are just looking to launch a website and buy a brick and mortar and get going on their idea. But there are some high growth ventures, and so what we've tried to do is put in place a mentorship program where we take one of our advisors and pair them up and really help them. The idea is to get them successful in local competitions. That's what we want to feed them into. And so there's maybe 1 or 2 a cycle that we get, and we try to pair them with someone like either myself who's done it before or someone that's a judge in those competitions and give them access to resource to help them write the application. And so that hopefully is when we would hand them off into the system. Once they're applying to Arch Grants and they're meeting people there, we're there from however they can help, but that's kind of the handoff that we're hoping to be. We're serving that role in between nothing and Arch Grants.
Any other questions? All right, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
I want to hear your elevator pitch for Nanopore.
Okay, sounds good. So at Nanopore Diagnostics, we're developing a rapid test for diagnosing bacterial infections. Current bacterial diagnostics take days to diagnose infections. Physicians currently, therefore, have no choice but to prescribe solely based on your symptoms. We've all experienced this. You have a chest or sinus infection, or at least you think you do. You call your physician or you go see him, and based on your symptoms alone, they give you the antibiotics. That empiric treatment, prescribing based on symptoms alone, is incorrect 50% of the time. So in the US today, 50% of antibiotic courses are not prescribed properly. It's a staggering number when you think about how often we use antibiotics. But that number is downright frightening when you think about people with deadly bacterial infections, people that are sepsis, where their chance of survival changes on an hourly time scale. So that's the market we're really focused on. Those patients have infections that are killing them quickly, and they need treatment immediately. So physicians, because they have no idea what they have, prescribe them cocktails of broad-spectrum antibiotics, trying to cover many potential infection types. Our rapid test will allow physicians to instead know exactly what that patient has upon first presenting with symptoms, and therefore prescribe them the ideal targeted therapy immediately, and thereby decrease hospital costs and increase the actual quality of care for those dying patients.
Great. Thank you very much.